Welcome to the barn, coming to you from our Milwaukee studio. Micah here and our resident in-house true crime superfan, Alyssa.
Hi.
And we have a very special guest today, here to talk about the upcoming brand new live show, Cold Case Live, as host and international cold case expert, Mr. Joe Kennedy. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kennedy. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Micah and Alyssa. I'm doing great, and I hope y'all are.
We are doing fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to spend with us today. I know you're a busy man out on the tour. Before we jump into the tour and the shows and Cold Case Live, can you give us a short bio? You know, you've had a really impressive career through NCIS, working with police enforcement agencies and things like that. Can you kind of give us a brief overview of your career and kind of how you got to where you are now with doing the shows?
Yeah, Micah. So I did spend my entire career in law enforcement with NCIS as a special agent, and I spent 28 years around the globe, essentially. Traveling, the various different countries, working murders, cold cases, and I had a blast when they started winding down. It's time to retire. In 2014, I was actually challenged by a district attorney in North Carolina. Hey, will you set up a coalition here to help the local law enforcement and some of the state law enforcement agencies with their cold cases, based on our success. And he asked me to do that because I had helped set up NCIS's cold case squad in 1995 and then had went all over the world, essentially helping other countries, whether it was Japan or the Philippines or Brazil, setting up cold case squads. So I did that, and that's what I do today. Is I'm part of the Carolinas Cold Case Coalition, and we just are a group of volunteers of retired local, state, and federal police officers. And we go, essentially, it was started out just for North and South Carolina, but we've ended up helping on cases all across the country and even internationally.
That's so impressive. And the international background is really incredible. And I'm just wondering the differences and similarities with crimes and the processes between America and other countries you've worked with.
Yeah, so Alyssa, I'll use just two quick examples for you. So let's take the Philippines as the first country, because I helped them set up a cold case squad. And, a lot of limited resources down there. They just don't have, the same capacity to solve a case from the technological angle. And so they have to rely more on the gumshoe detective work, interviews and getting folks to cooperate with them to solve a case. Whereas in 2000, I helped the Netherlands set up their cold case squad. And they've actually been very successful since then. But they're on par with us here in the United States. They have all the current technological advantages, DNA, just equipment, etc. So it can be very different depending on the country you're in. I've actually found that some of those more primitive countries, right, or third world places, they actually have better investigators because they don't have to they can't rely on the technology. They have to go out and do it all themselves.
That's so interesting. I've never thought of that. It's almost like you require a completely different skill set depending on where you are solving these cases.
Yeah, you do. And to solve a cold case, it's just like a hot case. There's three things we have to do. We have to have some physical evidence. We have to get some witnesses that know about it or heard something, or we ultimately have to get the suspect to confess.
How much of your time did you spend international, would you say, compared to here in the States?
So, Micah, let me just think here. Probably well over half of my career, I would say, probably about 60% of my career was overseas, and lived in Puerto Rico for a couple of years, lived in Japan for 6 years, traveled.
Wow.
I've been in all the war zones of Iraq and Afghanistan. I have dozens of months there, but that adds up to I guess about 3 years there total as well, and in other not just in war zones, but other locations. Just people don't realize where NCIS agents actually go. There's only about 1,200 of us in the world, and we typically find ourselves in another country, working on some criminal investigation that's transpired there.
And it sounds like you have plenty of experience. So let's talk about Cold Case Live. So this is our third year covering these shows, which used to be the psychology of serial killers, right? So can you give us an overview of what attendees of the show can expect during Cold Case Live and how it's different than what we've experienced the last couple of years with the psychology of serial killers?
Well, I think it's going to be very different, Micah, simply because, serial killers are just a small percentage of murderers, and, they fall into a realm of their own. What we're talking about is, the majority of murders, about, 95% of them is around the lines of some kind of altercation, some kind of disagreement, but we don't know who did it. Or maybe we do know who did it, but we can't prove it. And so how do we figure it out, right, with the limited amount of information we have, or maybe we have witnesses that are reluctant to tell us, bystanders that know exactly what transpired, but they won't reveal that to us. And so I think what the audience will be surprised with is how we as investigators have to approach cold cases, and those ingredients that we use to actually solve them.
How many of those cold cases, so cold cases are still open, right? So how many of these cases date back, or what's the time frame of a lot of these cases? Do some of them go back 20, 30 years or more, or a lot of these like within the past decade or maybe even less?
Well, if we look at the statistics, Mike, I will tell you that since 1965, so if you add that up, that's a long time ago. We have about and well, it's near 340,000 unsolved murders in the United States.
Wow, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable.
That's an astronomical number, right? If you look, murder peaked in the U.S. in 1992-93, about 24,500. If you look to some, 2023 stats, over 20,000, 21,000. Today, we're only solving about half of the murders in the U.S., about 50% of them.
Wow.
If you go back to just 1990, we were solving about 67% then. And some of that is, I say some of it, a lot of that is bystander behavior. Folks used to cooperate. It is tougher to get folks to reveal what they know these days. And so that's the key to being a good cold case investigator is how can I get those folks that know to trust us so that they will give us the information to help solve the case.
Now, technology has changed a ton. I'm going a little off script here. So people always bring up like I'm on camera with everything I do, right? So how has, you started this in the 90s when those kinds of things weren't as prevalent, where there was a camera in every nook and cranny and street corner. How has that either helped you or assisted you in, solving cases in the recent past compared to doing it like back when you started? Or does it affect it at all?
Well, it does have some effect because, particularly with cameras, you're talking about Ring doorbells or home security systems or convenience stores, having all cameras. I mean, all of them having cameras, et cetera. And that's important. Telephones are important as well. But at the end of the day, Michael, believe it or not, so what, we can put a person, at the crime scene. That still doesn't mean they did it. Right. Or
Sure.
We see them walk into the house, or we see them walk into the garage or walk into the field. But we still, without 100% certainty, right, the only way we're going to get that is if we can create enough intimacy with them to get them to trust us so they'll confess, to support whatever types of video surveillance we might have.
Yeah, that's something I always wondered about.
Yeah.
It's not that I would go out and commit a crime or anything, but I always think it's got to be harder now.
Right.
Because
That's
of
always
things
been
exactly
my
like
thoughts,
that. We
too.
saw him at, the Hyatt Hotel at 4:58 p.m. here, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, they certainly help. I mean, they help develop timelines and place people in certain locations at certain times. But, as I illustrated, that doesn't mean that they did it. And it's the same thing with DNA. Just because we find the person's DNA at a crime scene doesn't mean that they're the one that did the murder. How did it get there? Was it expected to be there, or was it not expected to be there? When it's not expected to be there, it's easier. We got more probative value in that evidence. But if it was expected to be there for some reason, then that's not as helpful as people might be led to believe.
Sure.
Wow. Everything you do is so knowledgeable and inspirational. So I need to know what inspired you to create the Cold Case live show and tour. What got you here?
Yeah, Alyssa, I was really reluctant at first, quite candidly, because, I'm used to, all of us in law enforcement are somewhat, we grow up being parochial, but I have learned that, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, that as we get the citizenry involved, we're actually going to solve more cases. And Micah mentioned it about the advancements in technology with DNA. That's the game changer right now. Forensic investigative genetic genealogy, building those family trees based on surnames, people's last names, following that paternal and maternal bloodlines, like the commercial databases do with 23andMe, Ancestry.com. That's going to get us to those suspects we otherwise would never have gotten to. And we're relying on the public, hey, just sometimes a person submitting their DNA to the database actually might help solve an investigation.
Really?
Wow.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that at all.
So that's how the citizens help, is you get them involved and they submit what they're able to help you.
Well, that's just one example, because sometimes, depending on communities and what the mobility of the residents of those community has been in the past, that can be helpful. Also, you'll see that we have citizens that are helping the genealogist, in doing genealogical work. Also volunteering their time. You'll see a lot of cold case podcasts nowadays, and things, trying to reach out to the public for information. There's GoFundMe pages. Some of this new technology with DNA is very expensive, for these police departments that have very limited budgets. And so a lot of times the citizenry might be able to help just generate funds to help solve a cold case in their area.
One more thing about the technology, because this is something that really interests us. So how does AI factor into this? I feel like people still have mixed feelings about AI. It's really good at this, but it's not so good at this. I saw that you guys are utilizing some of that in your investigations. So how does the AI play a role?
Yeah, Micah, this is in the extremely early stages. But, 30 years ago, when an investigator did a case and it became cold, that investigative file, it was really just a bunch of documents. But today, if we look at a 7, 8, 10-year-old case, that thing is going to be full of digital media, right? Surveillance camera footage, telephone records, right? And it's in a whole different world. And it's almost impossible now, if you just think about a person's text messages or the number of pictures on someone's phone. And for a detective to sit down, they're just not humanly possible to go through a lot of that. So if we can set up the right parameters within the AI, it will actually help do a lot of research, right, and eliminating so that information that's not necessary, so we can actually focus on the correct suspects or at least narrow down the pool of suspects. And I'm excited about AI because it's, as I said, it's in its infancy, but we are every day wondering how can we apply AI to aid these detectives in solving these cases.
It's almost like an assistant detective, and even documents. I'm sure you've got documents that are hundreds of pages long. It can pull stuff from that, I assume, as well. Scanning things, it can really be that detective assistant for you.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. I just got a case. I just talked to an attorney the other day that's prosecuting a case, and she said, "Okay, I'm going to send it to you. Will y'all take a look at it? Help us to give us your thoughts. Are we on the right track? Or are we not?" And it was 21,000 documents.
Wow.
21. So, and I start looking at it, and I go, "Oh my gosh!" And it's like a 4-year-old case. It's not even quite 4 years old yet. And I went, "Oh my gosh!" And I thought, and a lot of it is, it runs the gamut. Some of them is just one little page, of a printout that's, halfway down the page, but some of it's, very detailed witness statements and everything. So to your point, Mike, yes, some of the data mining can get quite extensive on these investigations.
Yeah, it can really help expedite the process.
Yes, for sure.
Returning back to the live show, I did read that you were interested in maybe some breakthroughs on some cold cases. Are there any particular cases that you are interested in hearing audience input or community input about, maybe even having some breakthroughs on?
Well, we're going to certainly ask those questions, of the audience. This is what we're trying to do in this show is display a couple of cold cases, the investigative process, right? The methodology, the protocol of how did we solve a particular case, so that we can get that in their minds clearly, because everything's not what you see on TV for sure. And then from that, share a couple of cases. Some of them the audience will be familiar with, some they won't. But then, do they have any insights, or what do they think about that case? It's the show is designed to be interactive, so that they don't have to sit there in the receive mode for the entire show. The second part of the show, we're hoping to get some good audience participation.
Do you plan on talking about anything local to Milwaukee or Wisconsin at all?
If anything is brought up there, when I'm going about doing these tours in several of the locations, I'm actually meeting with local detectives.
Oh, wow.
And looking at their cases, right, to give them some ideas or maybe some insights that I have them along the way. But I'm not. Milwaukee's still down the road a little bit, so quite candidly, I haven't gotten there yet.
No worries
I've
at all.
got several stops before, but that's certainly an intention, and we're also telling any local departments, hey, if you have anything that I can take a look at, and here's what I want you folks to keep in mind, and the listeners, Micah and Alyssa, is no one individual solves a case, right? It's teams that solve cases, and the information and experience I'm bringing is what I have learned from homicide detectives all over the world. I don't have an original idea. I tell people that all the time. Look, it's what I've learned from all these other great detectives and police officers, in my travels with NCIS.
This is a live kind of interactive experience, right? So how will the audience be involved in the show, and what kind of input are you hoping to receive from them?
Well, we're just going to do some question answering. We have a QR code to do that. So as the questions come in, we'll try to answer them, and then maybe specific member that submitted that question would be willing to raise their hand and say, okay, well, to further explore the conversation or the idea or the question they posed.
So have you had any instances where the public involvement has helped actually solve a case in the past?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's certainly cases where the public has come forward based on, seeing a billboard, listening to a podcast. Absolutely. We've had that. And more than, and that's throughout the country. You'll see that there's a thirst right in the true crime world. And it is actually, as we're kind of surprised, it's actually helping solve some cases, through the exposure to cases.
That's incredible. And, we represent the Milwaukee area as well as the area in St. Louis. I know you'll be there sooner than you'll be up to see us. But I feel like Milwaukee, just because we have a famous one, right? We have Dahmer. So I feel like the attention or the at least interest in true crime or cold cases seem to be maybe a little bit heightened here, maybe in other areas. Have you come across that in different cities where that certain action is a little bit more prevalent?
Well, I will tell you, we just left Anaheim the night before last, and there, obviously you got the Golden State Killer, you got the Zodiac, you got the Black Dahlia. I mean, there's just a lot of, depending on what city you're in, if historically there's been a serial predator or a serial offender there with some notoriety, those always come up.
So how long is the show? We were trying to find how long this experience is. So how long is the experience when folks come out to see Cold Case Live?
Yep. So there's 2 acts with a 15-minute intermission. So there's 2 acts with a 15-minute intermission. The first is about an hour where we go through, we share what cold cases are, how we solve them, give an example of cases that have been solved. And then that whole second part, which is about 45 minutes to 50 minutes after the 15-minute intermission, is the question and answer, is the interactive portion of it.
And how do you select the cases that you go through during the show?
Well, there's no, we don't have a set case that we use every night. I mean, some of them will be the same, but if we got a case in the local area that folks want to discuss, or is maybe, if there's knowledge about it, or maybe some tips, the information I'm going to apply can be solved to any cold case, and is applied to all cold cases. So some of that is working with the folks locally to see what interest might be in the case that evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. Wednesday, October 9th at the Pageant in St. Louis, if you're in our St. Louis listening area. Saturday, October 12th at the Barrymore Theater across the state in Madison. And then Monday, October 28th, right here in Milwaukee at the Pabst Theater. Can you tell everybody how they can get involved and get tickets?
So, Micah, the best way to do that is to go to coldcaselive.com. And that will walk everyone through the process of securing a ticket. And we'll hope to see, I hope folks will come out for it. And I hope to see you and Alyssa there, Micah.
We will be there. We couldn't be more excited.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the time, Joe.
Thank you.
And we will see you very soon next month.
Okay. Hey, make your presence known, and I'll step out and chat to you guys after the show.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much for the time, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.